the public policy in place where they are desperately seeking to make sure that our employees are protected, okay? So the Secretary of Labor has the discretion. I'm seeing notes all over. We know the Senate is continuously right now fighting through what is going to happen in terms of the stimulus packages that are out there. These packages will help small business owners. Saw something yesterday on Twitter that said the Senate Small Business Committee, which is chaired by Senator Marco Rubio, they're discussing loans for 250% of 1 month payroll, including debt forgiveness. Okay, so I want you to know as we move forward, they're not done yet. The protections, the exceptions, those are not done yet. Those are going to be forthcoming. They're going to be forthcoming prior to this law being effective on April 2nd. So have faith. Let's go to the next slide. Let's just skip right on over to slide 5, please, Jenny. Again, the Paid Sick Leave Act applies to employers with fewer than 500 employees. Employers who are healthcare providers and emergency responders can opt out of this coverage. Again, the Secretary of Labor may also exempt them. Again, the Secretary of Labor has the discretion to exempt businesses with fewer than 50 employees if compliance would jeopardize the viability of the small business. Again, this has not been done yet, but I expect this to be forthcoming. When the law is made effective, employers are required to provide their notice within a week of the law change, which is required to be posted in the workplace. For those of you who are telecommuting, I recommend that you have a shared drive where you have all of your employer postings and just let your employees know where to find them, okay? As defined under the Act, employees defined consistent here with the Fair Labor Standards Act. Let's move to the next slide, Jenny. The rule. So let's just get right down to the heart of the rule here. The rule is that an employer shall, this is mandated, mandatory, not permissive, shall provide paid sick time to the extent that an employee is unable to work or telework due to need for the following. Number 1, if an employee is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. Okay. Number 2, the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns about COVID-19. If the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking medical diagnosis. And so those top 3 are sort of in a category by themselves. And then let's move on to the next 3, because the law here really does classify them differently in how they're being treated. So number 4, if the employee is caring for an individual who is subject to a mandated government quarantine or self-quarantine, or if the employee is caring for a son or daughter, this includes foster children, this includes adopted children, if the school is not operational, which is going on currently, or if daycare providers or childcare providers are unavailable, okay? Number 6 is a little bit of a catch-all to say that if someone has experienced a similar condition and the Secretary of Labor or the Secretary of Health and Human Services has designated that condition is similar, then they're also included here, okay? Moving on. Let's talk about when this starts. A lot of us who have paid leave time for our workers currently have a years of service in place, or it's earned on a certain way. This is goes away. There is no waiting period. This applies to every worker that you have, regardless of time served, okay? And the rule is 2 weeks. So 2 weeks for a full-time employee is 80 hours, and 2 weeks for part-time employees is based upon the average that they have worked over the prior 6-month period. If you have not employed them for the prior 6 months, then it is what you intended their schedule to be on an average 2-week running tally, okay? Let's move on to the next one. I want to be very clear. The law is very clear on what employers may not do here. Employers may not say, I already offer you paid time off, so take this time, I'm not paying any additional time. Employers are required to give this in addition to other paid time off that they have. And this, the sequence of using this paid leave is that this leave shall be used first, okay? An employer cannot tell someone, I will only give you this time, I will only grant you this time. If you find a replacement, nope, can't do that, okay? If someone needs to use this time, it is theirs to use, and employers, you are responsible for finding their replacement or substitute. Next slide, please. Employers, you can require reasonable notice. You can tell someone, hey, let me know if you're going to be utilizing this. You cannot discriminate or retaliate. Of course, this is typical. Can't do that under any way, but the law is reminding you of this again. So there is a little bit of economic crisis right here. Businesses are asking themselves, well, how can I afford this, right? Let's move on to really what the dollars and cents of this are. And then in just short measure, I'm going to pass the baton over to Kurt and Mindi, and they're going to tell you about some economic benefits that you have in terms of tax credits. Compensation amounts. Compensation amounts are based upon the employee's current rate of pay, provided that the current rate of pay is equal to minimum wage. Remember how we talked about the categories of workers? So government quarantine, self-quarantine, people who are experiencing symptoms and seeking medical advice. That paid sick leave for them is compensated at 100% of their applicable rate of pay, with a maximum of $511 a day, okay? Or $5,110 total for 2 weeks, okay? The second category of workers, those who are caring for others, that's 2/3 of their rate of pay, with a maximum of $200 a day or $2,000 total, okay? Again, that is, I'm gonna let Kurt and Mindi dig into the tax credits that come from those. I wanna move on to the next part of the law, and the next part of the law is on medical leave. So we might be familiar with the existing FMLA. The FMLA really does not apply to small business owners right now. People who have less than 15 employees, this is not something that you think about every day. Let's go to the next slide, Jenny. And what I really want to do is have people to have an understanding of the change. This does not change FMLA for other circumstances. This only changes how FMLA will apply relative to COVID-19 leave, okay? So current FMLA applies to employers with 50 or more employees, and those, in order for those employees to be eligible, they have had to have worked at least 1,250 hours over the past 12 months, okay? The change here is that for COVID-19 leave, it again applies to all employers with fewer than 500 employees, okay? Again, the Secretary of Labor has the ability to limit that and to exempt the small business owner. That clarification has not yet been completed, but I expect clarifications to be forthcoming. The qualifying event is the same as it is for the paid sick leave. If the employee is unable to work or telework due to a need to care for children, for son or daughter under the age of 18 years of age, if a place of business if a school has been closed, if the daycare center has been closed, if the child care provider cannot provide services, this is where the leave is appropriate, okay? The going back to the existing FMLA, currently it's 12 weeks of unpaid leave for how it's drafted for all other things. For COVID-19, we have 12 weeks of, we have 2 weeks of unpaid leave, and that's how it starts. Again, remember this can piggyback off of the paid sick leave, where they're getting 2/3 of their pay. And then for the remaining 10 weeks, it's paid at 2/3 of their existing pay, okay? Jenny, perfect, thank you. Again, the same maximum amount applies, $200 a day. Here, $10,000 total, okay? So these are big changes for what we're looking at. You can see here that as the law is coming in, there is a swooping public policy that is being met to protect our employees and to protect our family units within America. I cannot see that public policy will change entirely, but they will start to balance, and they will start to really make exceptions for what the small business owner is really capable of doing. You will see other things. We will see economic stimulus packages that are coming out to support that. So we will see a balance over the next few weeks of how this really impacts us overall. The last thing that I want to talk about is FMLA. The purpose of it is a Job Protection Act. Okay, so that's the second part of the policy that it has. So the last thing that I want to really hit on is that the amended FMLA for COVID-19 does continue. Go ahead and keep that on that last slide, Jenny. Okay. That's perfect. The job restoration requirement is still alive and well. Okay, it on its face does exempt out the small business owner with fewer than 25 employees. Okay, so we are already seeing those exemptions. So again, right now under law, the small business owner, 15 or less in the state of Illinois, they are not required to hold jobs open. Everyone understands the operational constraints that has on a business owner. Here, it's already in the law that there's an exception with an employer with 25 or fewer employees. If you're required to eliminate position due to economic conditions or other changes as a result of this public health emergency, okay, then you are not required to hold jobs open, okay? However, there is some timing that's put into place. So here, there is a little bit of a look back. And the look back is that if over the next year, you put that position back in place, then you're going to go back to that employee and offer them that job back, okay? That's really all I have. I'm going to pass the baton over and ask that Kurt and Mindi give us some comfort into some tax credits that are out there to help us through this.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I am now going to pull up their presentation.
Carol, while she's doing that, have you heard one question on that? Over the weekend, we were reading and seeing potentially that businesses being declared non-essential, being closed down because of, you know, the home and shelter, applying to them as well. Have you?
So I haven't seen any good clarification on that, but remember that right now, this law is not effective. It's been signed into law, but it actually doesn't take place till April 2nd. so by my interpretation from what I'm seeing is that businesses that are non-essential, that are closing their doors, that are not operating, have a whole different set of things that they are dealing with. And so a business who's not operational during this time, of course, is not a business that I would think that this would apply to.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And going to pull this up now for you.
All right. Well, as Carol mentioned, when they first passed the bill, there was many more questions than answers, just like any quick legislation like this. I know when it was passed, we spent a great deal of time trying to decipher it and things like that, and it still continues to evolve the details and specifics. Of course, one major question we had was this burden on small employers or any employers that it applies to. And because of that, originally when the bill passed, as you're aware of, when payroll taxes, you remit those payroll tax deposits bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, and then you file a 941 every quarter. The original plan was to get this tax credit that we're going to talk about on that quarterly. And we could probably go to the next slide there, Jenny, I apologize. Waiting till that next quarter. So since it goes into effect April 2nd, like Carol mentioned, you would start paying this out in April, May, June. You would not get any kind of relief or help from the government that they promised until July when you file your 941. And that's what we were planning for all of last week up until Friday. They finally came out with clarification and announcement. The IRS, DOL, and Treasury got together and realized, that this was not going to work. This was even a bigger burden. They were trying to help employees, but they put a larger burden on the employers. And one thing I noticed on my slide, please forgive me, but I noticed U.S. is not both capitalized there. We were putting this together quickly, as you can imagine, since this announcement came out Friday. So we might find some more grammatical spelling problems. But so that was the gist of that. So if we go to the next slide, that announcement on Friday, and a couple of these items that Carol already clarified, but the announcement Friday was a major announcement for all of us. The businesses can retain and access funds they would otherwise pay to IRS and payroll taxes. They call it a credit. It's really an offset at this point, but it's huge. I mean, this is a major shift and assistance to these small employers. And I'll give some more details. The amounts if the amounts are not sufficient to cover the cost of the paid leave, and I'll show that as well, an example, they're coming out with an expedited advance from the IRS. Supposed to be released this week. So there's going to be a quick application to get that money back from the IRS. They promised us expedited relief, which is, again, when we all think of government and expedited, we get a little nervous. But when it comes to this, I think, as Carol said, they are really pushing hard to make sure that the employers are not going to be overly burdened with this, along with everything else going on. And then the other two is what Carol spoke about, the Department of Labor releasing the simple and clear criteria for less than 50 employees. But then there's also a 30-day non-enforcement period for this as well, that they will not be, enforcement actions against any employers for 30 days, because as we're all trying to sort this out. So next slide. Somehow it came through a little off. I apologize for that as well, probably in the email maybe. Retain funds offsetting the tax payment. For the payroll administration of this, and I could share this with anyone, I can put it into a PDF so it's easier to read. So initially when you're paying this paid leave that Carol gave the details, you're going to need to separate that out, pay that separate from the normal compensation and things like that. In other words, you're going to have to be able to pull a report, and when you do your payroll taxes and things like that, that separates that amount in order just to facilitate this tax credit. On this slide, it says normal payroll taxes are withheld. Let me clarify that when I went through that too quickly. By normal, your federal withholding, your state withholding, and Medicare will be withheld from your employees' taxes. It is federal unemployment exempt, but we're not sure about state unemployment. We haven't got clarification on that yet. Still waiting for that. Some of this clarification came through this weekend. As a matter of fact, I just got an email. I was sitting here for some more of this. It's also Social Security exempt, so you do not withhold the 6.2% OASDI tax as well, but you do. It is not Medicare exempt. Example number one, if you have an eligible employer that paid out $5,000 in sick leave, and otherwise their entire payroll tax deposit is going to be $8,000. They simply subtract that 5 from the 8 and only remit the $3,000 in taxes. Again, I'm sure they're going to have some kind of documentation eventually for this, but initially, since these payroll taxes are done online, you just submit the $3,000. There's no additional information needed at that time, but you will need to be able to document it eventually. Pretty straightforward. Here's the other one. If let's say you paid out $10,000 in sick leave and you're required to pay $8,000 in taxes, well, then your $2,000 in the hole, there's not enough to cover that. There's going to be a expedited method to get that $2,000 refund back. They haven't said, you know, if you can carry that forward. In other words, the next tax deposit is reverse to that. They haven't given clarification on that. I would venture to say yes, because their whole goal here is to not remit funds to the IRS that you're just going to get back. So does that make sense, Mindy, or sound about what you've read on that?
Yeah, the only other thing I have seen is with the application, they say that the money will be back within, they're hoping, 2 weeks. So that's what I'm not sure if it would be truly an overpayment to be carried forward or if it's going to be a refund check in the mail.
Right. And let me clarify. Yeah, and you're right. I'm thinking is for an employer who knows that their next one is going to be less. So in other words, the sick leave maybe goes down after that next payroll deposit instead of waiting the 2 weeks. If they can just offset that, I have no idea. Net that out. Again, the good part here is, and this isn't by no means advice because we don't know it. The enforcement of this is going to be a struggle for them just as much as us. And I'm not trying to say do anything by any stretch. In other words, your best foot forward is what it's going to take. And especially initially, as payroll tax softwares are being completely reprogrammed for this, you know, in a very short time frame here, 2 weeks is not a lot of time to program all this in the payroll software. I know Mindy had a meeting with our payroll software Thursday or so, and they are working like crazy to implement all these changes. And again, they already started trying to program for what they originally thought was going to be a 941 offset form at the end of the quarter, but now that changed. So feel sorry for some of these software programmers and any kind of software at this point. You know, they're programming for a moving target sometimes. All right. We can go on to the, again, this is that small business exemption that Carol spoke about. Less than 50 employees was part of that announcement as well. And the 30-day non-enforcement period. So again, the number one advice here is start working on getting all of this implemented. And if you do in a reasonable manner, I don't foresee you getting penalized, or they say you won't get penalized in the first 30 days, especially with these tax credits. So if you miscalculate a tax credit, there will be reasonable cause to most likely get out of it. I'm not suggesting you do it on purpose by any stretch. Do your very best, because you are going to have a bookkeeping nightmare to try to sort that out otherwise. So it's again, the tax credits, I don't have, you know, there's not as much to speak about on them because it is, and they're simplified as far as offsetting those tax credits. It is big because they're in essence paying your payroll for you of that sick leave. So the government has implemented this and they are going to pay it for you, even if it's a slight delay in a couple weeks. It's a really great way and gives you options potentially, or if you're less than 50 employees, to keep good employee, if you're to keep these employees as well, rather than making decisions now before April 2nd, whether you lay off everybody, if you're downsizing and things like that or whatever. So it definitely gives you some options, or at least it carries a lot of the burden for you with these payroll tax credits. I don't ever recall seeing something this generous ever and easy to facilitate. And as Carol said too, all weekend we spent, and I'm not going to try to speculate what's coming out by any stretch because it has changed. They are working very hard to improve and even more stimulus for the employers. So hope that helps. We will continue to monitor the situation.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Kurt, for that.
Thank you.
And just so everybody who is watching and listening right now knows, you are going to have the opportunity for questions at the end. You are also welcome to type in any questions that you think of and put them in the chat, so that way we can refer to those later at the question and answer period. So next up, I'm going to be bringing on Joanne DiMaggio May, to talk about the SBA loans that are now available. You ready, Joanne?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to pull this up for you.
Perfect. So I'll get started. So as of Friday, all 102 counties in the state of Illinois were declared eligible by SBA for the disaster loan. $2 million has been allotted per business, and the goal is for a 2 to 3 week decision at this time, but I'm sure it's based on volume, so that'll change the more applications they receive. And I know this weekend the portal, because essentially it is an online process, they do prefer that you don't mail it in or do anything in person. So online, and there have been some glitches in getting the tax documents uploaded and things like that. So if you get any questions, just tell them to be patient, try again. And also there is an email and customer service phone number that you'll see coming up on the next page that people can refer to with their application number. So basically with this loan, the goal is to cover operating capital during this time of crisis, suggesting a minimum of 3 months to keep the business afloat. Anything over $25,000 would require collateral, and there are some specific SBA documents and an IRS tax form, which are mentioned in these 2 pages that I've provided. So IRS tax form 4506-T, and then SBA form 5, 413, 2202 for any principal with over with 20% or more ownership, and then finally the SBA form 1368. And those are on the SBA website, and I can certainly provide those directly as well. 2018 tax returns are required at a minimum. They may look for 2019 if possible, and if nothing else, the most current P&L, profit or loss statement would be needed. As I mentioned, the website, the email, and customer service number are provided there in those slides. As I said, collateral is required over $25,000. And essentially, SBA will take a second or third position. They'll do everything they can when considering that collateral if there's anything possible to secure. Property is the preferred type of collateral, but they'll also look at inventory, accounts receivable, and equipment. Essentially, some of the stuff that we've already mentioned as well. I wanted to just bring up also the fact that IRS has deferred tax payments for 90 days, and sales tax payments have been deferred as well. This is a fluid situation. I know I kind of went through that information rather quickly. Once the application is submitted, there will be an SBA coordinator assigned to your loan application, and you'll be able to communicate directly with them. And in fact, you can adjust the amount and some of that information as you proceed based on your circumstances. Other than that, our office is helping with the application process, mitigating some of those questions. Technical glitches, we'll have to refer to, SBA and their customer service people, but anything that I can do and my office can do to help with the application, with those SBA forms. You can email those forms in if you're not able to upload them directly. Just give your application number along with the forms, and they'll reach out and let you know that they've received and done their part, so that those forms are included with your application. We are all working virtually, so I look forward to emails and Zoom meetings to assist small businesses as we move forward. So that's all I have.
All right, I did scroll down here, so you guys all have this information. And while Joanne was talking, hopefully you guys were listening to her and not paying attention to what was happening in the chat yet, because in the chat box we did put in the PDF from Joanne's presentation. So this 2-page PDF is now in the chat box, so you can download it to your device. We also have in the chat box the PowerPoint presentations from Kurt and also Carol Sparks. So they did upload those as well, so you can refer to those. And then Mindy did put in a PDF version of the PowerPoint that Kurt did, so that way you guys have access to that as well. Kurt, did you want to jump in and say something?
Sure, it might be easier. Over the weekend, a large part of the new stimulus bill that they're talking involves more SBA loans or grants and things like that. And one major sticking piece was if you've already gotten a SBA disaster loan that Joanne's talking about, that you wouldn't be eligible for this additional funds. So our question here is it okay to start the application process, Joanne, and then potentially withdraw it, if you will, or since it does take a little while anyway, if that makes sense?
Yes, I would encourage almost any business. There are some ineligible entities like nonprofits and I think religious organizations, but I don't believe another SBA loan or a disaster loan is going to influence the decision and the availability of this particular program at this time. Nothing that I've heard reflects that. So I would always encourage people to apply. Another quick question that I did get, and I should have mentioned too, was if people have back taxes, for example, as long as they're on a payment plan, they can actually still apply and that would not be held against them. My understanding is if they haven't gone through that process and aren't paying currently on a program, some type of payment schedule, then that could be an issue. But if they are on a payment plan, then that would be okay. Also, as I mentioned, if collateral's already secured by another loan, SBA, even though they prefer, property and the such, they would possibly take second or third position, whatever they need to do to secure a loan.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. So at this point in time, if you have a specific question for either Carol, Kurt, or Joanne, you are welcome to, as I mentioned before, go ahead and type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Let us know who you want to ask the question of, whether it's Carol, Kurt, or Joanne, and then ask your question. We'll give them the opportunity to answer those. All right, Cheryl has a question for Joanne. Cheryl, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? All right, Cheryl, what is the typical interest rate for this disaster loan?
The interest rate is 3.75 currently from the information that we've received.
Wonderful. Okay, good. Thank you. What other questions do you have for those of you who are listening and have been paying attention? Lawrence says he can share retirement plan changes if you like. I'm not sure if we want, Carol, how do we want to address that? Yes, go right ahead. Are you unmuted, Lawrence?
I should be now.
Yes, there you are. Hello, Lawrence.
Here
Please
I
feel
am.
free.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the information. Last night, I was looking at some of the things coming down from Washington regarding retirement plan changes. We are a third-party administrator and have been for over 50 years on retirement plans. One of them, they're looking and probably will institute a change in the loan limitation from $50,000 to $100,000 as a hardship withdrawal. And they're changing the hardship withdrawal rules to allow individuals to take a hardship under the COVID-19 issue, and they would have up to 3 years to repay it, or they are looking at waiving the 10% penalty for early withdrawal also. So nothing is for sure yet, but there are going to be some changes relating to retirement plan administration and processing of distributions and such for accessing additional funds. So I would invite anyone who has additional questions on that. They can get back with me if you like, or I can put something out, you can share it.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, that was great information. Thanks, Larry, very much. You and I don't know each other, so that was I didn't know where to go with that one, but it looks like Carol knows you, so that's good. So what I'd like to do, please, is for all of our presenters, if you would please put your contact information in the chat box. So your preferred method of contact, whether it's email, office phone number, however it may be, so that way everyone has your exact preferred contact information. So that way, because y'all know what's going to happen here, we're going to get off this call and all of a sudden the question is going to hit you that you wanted to ask. So they are in the process of putting in their contact information in the chat box, so that way people can contact them. So Carol Sparks has hers in there. Looks like Kurt and Mindi are typing away furiously to get their information put in as well. And I imagine Joanne is as well. So if you think of a question after this, please feel free to reach out to Carol, Kurt, Mindi, or Joanne. And then Larry, please feel free to put in your contact information if people have questions about that. If they don't have a retirement specialist working with them, please feel free to do that as well. I'm sure most people probably know how to reach Joanne anyway. So, all right. Oh, there she goes. She got it typed in. Fabulous. So what other questions? We have about 10 minutes left here for any additional questions for Carol, Kurt, Joanne, or potentially even Larry. I'm giving people time to type in their chat in case they don't want to unmute. And I did want to let our presenters know I've already had a few people reach out to me via email saying thank you guys so much for putting this together. It was very informative and they did enjoy it quite a bit. So thank you so much to Carol and Kurt and Mindi and Joanne for all your hard work putting this together.
You're welcome.
Jenny,
Glad to do it.
If I can just jump in real quick, I know that this isn't the right forum to continue this conversation, but one of the things that I know as business owners, and Kurt brought this up initially at the beginning of our time together today, is that essential versus non-essential. And what are our non-essential businesses doing? In the same thought process, what are our essential businesses that are doing that are required to scale back? And so sometimes that just comes from good collaboration, asking people what it is that they're doing, what they can do in their business. And so these are conversations that I intend to continue with business owners. I really enjoy collaboration. I'm grateful for Kurt and Mindi's expertise today, for Joanne's expertise. Jenny, I'm grateful that you are facilitating and that you are a Zoom expert. But really the changes here are new for all of us. Mm-hmm. The public policy behind some of these, those are easy. That's the easy part. The why is it that we're doing what we're doing? But the nitty gritty of how it will impact us and what our business solutions are going forward are very fact intensive. And I recommend that business owners continue to collaborate with other business owners, to continue to find coaches like Jenny who hold you accountable, to sit down with professionals and to ask these good problem solving issues. I've worked with many business owners over the years who want to continue to be in business. And sometimes that really just takes taking that business plan, spinning it around a little bit and asking yourself, how can I look at this differently? How can we get through this? This is a time of change. Do we think it's going to be a short time? Maybe. Do we know how long it will continue to impact us? No, we don't. So again, I will continue to pull people in to collaborate, to invite business owners in for that good meeting of the minds where we can all help and support each other. Larry asked a question: are contractors considered essential or non-essential entities? The executive order that was put in place last Friday does name, so when we use contractors, that's a pretty big sphere. Trade services can be essential, but I would recommend that you pull out the executive order and take a look at that, Larry. I can put that link up. That has some really good information on that. We're using the phrases essential and non-essential in the state of Illinois, but I can tell you what, everybody wants businesses to stay moving. So most people are considered operable. Work from home, telework. These are all things that we're recommending to every business owner at this point.
Great.
And one note on that too, I think, Carol, is every state, every locality that issues these orders are different potentially. depending on where they're at, that we've noticed when Pennsylvania started this, California, now Illinois. So it's very important to check where they're at.
Absolutely. We may have people
The
from all
governing
over
body.
listening and paying attention to this. Yeah, definitely true. Because we are close enough to Missouri. We may have gotten some Missouri people on here as well. So moving forward, just to let everybody know, we did record this, although I realized a few minutes in that it wasn't yet recording. So I did record starting with Carol's presentation. So we do have access to a recording. I will be getting that uploaded to a YouTube channel. That way we can share out. Carol, I'll send you the link since you sent the big email out to everybody, so that way you can share the link from there. It will take a little bit of time to get that uploaded and processed and everything, but we should have that out to everybody, I would think, by close of business today. So for those of you who want to watch this again, get all the information, in addition to the fact that in the chat box, we have given everybody's PowerPoint presentation and PDFs to go along with what's going on today. So any last questions before we let everyone get back to work? Larry says, thank you. Looks like people are jumping off. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our presentation today. Thank you for taking the time to learn about this. Thank you to our presenters, Carol, Mindi, Kurt, and Joanne, and also Larry for jumping in with some pertinent information as well. We really appreciate you guys doing this for small businesses, because there's a lot going on that we're very confused about. So it's nice to know that we've got some people helping to disseminate this information in a way that's easy to understand. So thank you guys so much. Great job today.
Thank you.